I was sitting in the waiting room of my cardiologist's office when my phone vibrated. The fluorescent lights above hummed faintly, casting a pale glow over the muted green walls. I had been staring at an outdated magazine for almost 10 minutes, pretending to read, trying to keep my mind calm before the appointment. At 71, my heartbeat sometimes felt like a rebel knocking at the walls of my chest, but I had learned to breathe through the fear. "Mom." The voice on the other end was bright and brisk, like someone announcing a party. "We're leaving for Zurich tomorrow. I sold the Malibu house in your car. We needed the cash. Bye." The words were so fast, so casual, that for a second I thought I'd misheard. My daughter Clarice had always been dramatic, but this was something else. The phone trembled slightly in my hand. I glanced around at the other patients, 2 older women whispering, a man scrolling his phone. Nobody knew that, right here in this quiet waiting room, my life had just been stolen in a single sentence. "Clarice," I said softly, but she kept talking. I could hear laughter in the background, a male voice, Jeremy's, her husband or partner, hard to tell which he really was. "I sold your $30 million beach house. We're leaving tomorrow." "Bye," she repeated, as if she enjoyed the sound of it. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. My voice came out steady like a note played on a piano after everyone else had slammed the keys. "Really?" I said. "You forgot something." There was a pause. She giggled nervously. "Forgot something? What do you mean?" But I didn't answer right away. I let the silence expand between us, the kind of silence that makes people shift in their seats. She didn't know the house she sold was just the beginning, because the building she lives in is actually mine. Every square inch, every hidden safeguard my late husband Robert had built was quietly waiting. I ended the call before she could say more. My hands were steady now. The waiting room faded. The magazine in my lap was just a prop. In that moment, I wasn't an aging woman waiting for a doctor. I was Selma Brooks, 71 years old, widow of Robert Brooks, mother of 1 daughter, and the unseen owner of an empire my daughter thought she had looted. For decades, I'd worked behind the scenes as an investment consultant for real estate developers. Robert had been the public face, but after his death, I had become the keeper of the keys. Clarice had never bothered to understand the paperwork she had me sign. She only saw cars, vacations, a husband who whispered about Zurich. She never saw me. I stared at my reflection in the dark glass of the waiting room window, silver hair pulled into a neat bun, a navy cardigan over a crisp blouse, a woman everyone thought was fragile. My heart was beating calmly now. It was almost funny how quickly calm returned once the shock passed. The receptionist called my name, but I didn't move. I was remembering the first time Robert and I walked on the deck of that Malibu house, barefoot, the Pacific rolling in with its salt air and secrets. He had smiled at me and said, "Selma, this is just a shell. What matters is what we hide inside." Back then, I thought he meant the view. Now I understood he had been speaking of something else entirely. I slid the phone back into my purse. Clarice's words still echoed. "We're leaving tomorrow. Zurich. Sold the Malibu house. My car." She had no idea that the car was a decoy, the house a facade, the bank accounts a maze built to protect not just money but dignity. Robert had always said, "If they try to take it, they'll only be taking smoke." I smiled faintly. The other patients probably thought I was reading a funny text. They didn't know I was planning my next move. This is where you might think I'm angry, but anger is useless at my age. Anger raises the blood pressure and clouds the mind. Instead, I let myself breathe in slowly. Betrayal hurts, but it also clarifies. When someone shows you who they are, as Robert used to say, you can finally stop pretending. I stood up and excused myself from the waiting room. "I'll reschedule," I told the receptionist, my voice polite. Something urgent came up. In truth, something urgent had been sitting in a sealed envelope at home for years. Robert's last instructions. I had promised him I would open it only when I felt the ground shift under my feet. This morning, as Clarice's voice rattled through my phone, the ground had shifted. Outside, the California sun hit my face. The parking lot smelled faintly of jasmine from a nearby hedge. I walked to my car, my old, modest sedan, not the one Clarice thought she'd sold, and sat for a moment with the engine off. People think wealth is visible. It's not. True wealth hides in plain sight, in paper trails, in careful clauses, in the patience of a widow who lets everyone underestimate her. I closed my eyes and saw Clarice's face when she was 5, running on the beach with a bucket of shells. She used to hand them to me like treasure. "Mom, look what I found." Her voice back then had been pure. She didn't know how to lie yet. Somewhere along the way, she stopped bringing me shells and started bringing me forms to sign. And I, tired and grieving Robert, signed without reading too closely. Or maybe I did read and chose to trust her anyway, believing a daughter wouldn't use her own mother's name as collateral. But trust without proof is like a house built on sand, and sand washes away. I opened my eyes and started the car. The plan was already forming. No shouting, no courtroom scenes, no slammed doors, only paper and patience. The same tools Robert had used to build his fortress. Clarice thought she had won. She had only just started playing a game I'd been mastering for decades. If you're listening to this story, you might be wondering why a 71-year-old woman isn't crying. Maybe you've been where I am, betrayed by someone you love, or maybe you fear you will be someday. I'm telling you this because silent strength doesn't mean silence forever. It means knowing when to move. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, keep listening. What happened next is proof that invisibility can be a shield, not a curse. It can be the quiet space where you gather your power. I put the car in drive and whispered to myself, "Really, you forgot something." My own words echoed back, and for the first time in months, I felt a kind of peace. And if you're watching this now, don't just watch. Be part of it. Share your thoughts in the comments, rate this story, and tell me where you're watching from. We're building a space for stories like ours, where quiet justice speaks louder than anger. Your support helps us create more of these journeys, and maybe it will give someone else the courage to choose self-worth over betrayal. I merged onto the coastal highway, the Pacific sparkling on my left. Somewhere in the distance was the house Clarice thought she'd sold, and somewhere even closer was the envelope waiting at home, sealed with Robert's careful hand, ready to be opened. The real story wasn't about a house. It was about a woman who had been underestimated for far too long. The envelope was exactly where I had left it. Hidden behind a row of old cookbooks I never used anymore, its paper had aged to a soft ivory color. Robert's handwriting on the front was sharp and steady, just like he'd been. Selma. Open this only when you're ready. Truly ready. I held it in both hands for a moment, standing in the quiet of my small guest house. This wasn't the main house, the beach house Clarice had so proudly declared sold, but the little place Robert and I used to call our escape within an escape. After he passed, I moved into it permanently, letting the main house fall under Clarice's attention. She liked to show it off during parties. I liked to hear the waves and sleep without footsteps above me. I slid a letter opener through the seal. My hands didn't shake. I had reached the point beyond grief, beyond outrage. Now it was clarity. Inside was a stack of documents neatly clipped, and on top of them, a letter. Sell, it began. If you're reading this, then things happen just as I feared they might, and that means you're finally ready to stop being only someone's mother, someone's wife. You're ready to be Selma again, the Selma who outsmarted every man in the boardroom and then chose to step into the background to raise our girl. I sat down slowly, letting the letter settle over me. First things first, you own everything. I didn't just leave you the house. I left you the structure, The whole engine. It's under a holding company I set up 10 years before I passed. Clarice doesn't know about it. She couldn't, even if she tried. Robert Estates LLC. It sounds like a fancy developer's firm, doesn't it? You're the sole beneficiary, the majority shareholder, and you have full power of attorney. I flipped to the next document. It was the Articles of Incorporation. Then came a deed, then a banking authorization, page after page, all with the name Robert Estates LLC printed neatly on top. I knew I wouldn't be able to protect you forever, the letter continued, but I wanted to leave behind more than just memories. I wanted you to have a shield and a sword. That's what this is. Not to hurt Clarice, but to protect yourself from what she might become. I closed my eyes. The salt of the ocean seemed to drift into the room through the slightly open window. Clarice had always been quick, charming, beautiful. She was my daughter, my only child, but Robert had seen something I hadn't, or perhaps I refused to see. That in her desire for success, she had stopped looking back to check who she was pushing out of the way. He had tried to talk to her about responsibility once. I remembered the fight that followed. She accused him of not believing in her. He had looked so tired that night. After she stormed out, he turned to me and said, "If she ever treats you like wallpaper, Sel, promise me you won't just blend into the background." I hadn't understood it then. Now I did. The doorbell rang. I folded the letter carefully and tucked it back into the envelope. It was Lawrence Kim, Robert's longtime attorney, and the only man I trusted more than I trusted myself at the moment. He stood in the doorway in his usual blazer and tie, holding a briefcase, his expression unreadable, but kind. "You opened it." "I did," I said, "and I need your help." He came inside without another word. We sat at the table where I used to shell peas and listen to Clarice talk about school. It felt like another lifetime. Lawrence placed a folder between us. "This is the updated list of holdings. Your name is already reinstated as majority owner. The building on Seabreeze Drive where Clarice and Jeremy are living, it's held under the same LLC." "She doesn't know that," I said. "She will." I nodded slowly. "Also," he added, "the paperwork she had you sign after Robert's funeral, I've gone through it. There's power of attorney language embedded inside, very subtle. It gives her authority to act on your behalf across several financial institutions." "So I really signed it," I murmured. "She presented it as a simple authorization to release funeral funds," Lawrence confirmed. "Technically legal, but morally questionable." "And the car?" "Sold, but not the one registered under the holding company. She sold your old Prius, the decoy." I actually smiled. Robert had insisted we keep that beat-up car on paper under my personal name. "A little misdirection," he'd said. "She thinks she gutted me," I whispered. "And yet here I am, holding the walls she doesn't even see." Lawrence looked at me. "What do you want to do?" "I want to wait." He blinked. "Wait?" "I want her to believe she got away with it. Let her feel comfortable. Let them buy their tickets to Zurich. Let them brag to their friends. And when they're ready to board that plane, when they've packed up their lies, I'll show her what she forgot." "Selma," he said gently, "are you sure you want to do this?" "I don't want revenge," I said. "I want her to know who she nearly erased. I want her to know that strength isn't loud, and that just because someone is quiet doesn't mean they're weak." Lawrence nodded. He understood. He always had. He pulled out another sheet. "There's one more thing. Robert set aside a secondary envelope. I have it. He asked me not to open it until you said these exact words." "What words?" "You said them just now. Let her feel comfortable." I laughed quietly. That man, always one step ahead. "Give it to me," I said. Lawrence handed me a thin red envelope. It felt heavier than its weight. "I'll leave you to it," he said, standing. "Call me when you're ready." When the door shut, I stared at the envelope for a long moment. Then I whispered, "You really planned it all, didn't you?" Outside, the waves continued crashing gently onto the shore. Inside, I took a breath and reached for the truth my husband had left behind once again. I sat in the same chair where Robert and I used to have our morning coffee, the red envelope still unopened in my lap. Before breaking its seal, I let my eyes wander to the ocean in the distance. Waves lapped rhythmically, as if reminding me that nothing ever really stays still. Not the sea, not people, not even daughters. I opened the envelope. Inside was not a letter, but photocopies, documents. One of them had my signature on it, and I had no memory of signing it. I scanned the header. It looked like one of those bland forms you fill out at a bank, all boilerplate language and fine print. But Lawrence's notes in the margin, scrawled in tidy blue ink, highlighted what mattered. The signature box was linked to a line that read, "Transfer of authority, full financial power of attorney." I recognized the date. It was 4 days after Robert's funeral. Clarice had come over that day with casseroles from neighbors and a stack of papers. "Mom," she'd said, "I know this is overwhelming, but the funeral home and the estate taxes, there's a lot of mess. I talked to a lawyer, and if you just sign these, I'll take care of everything." I remembered her holding my hand, her eyes glossy with what I thought was grief. She had already been planning this. Back then, I hadn't even checked the forms. I had trusted her. I hadn't noticed that 2 of the signature lines were blank when I returned them to her. And apparently, someone filled them in later. Someone who wasn't me. The next paper was even worse. It was a document authorizing access to one of our lesser-known joint accounts. I hadn't touched that account in years. It was meant to be a safety net, a small trust Robert and I had set aside when Clarice was young, and there in black and white were withdrawals, 4 of them, $30,000, $65,000, $180,000, $200,000, each tied to Jeremy Dalton's name, and each executed with authorization signed Selma Brooks. Except it wasn't my handwriting. My hand tightened around the papers. My own daughter had used my grief as cover. She had sat in my home, brought me food, and held my hand while stripping me of authority, one signature at a time. I reached for my phone and called Lawrence. "She forged my signature," I said, skipping hello. He didn't sound surprised. "Yes, I suspected, but I needed you to say it." "How long have you known?" "I didn't know," he said. "I assumed. We couldn't access those forms until you reopened the holding company. Once your legal authority was restored, I got everything." I leaned back in the chair. She planned this before Robert's funeral. She and Jeremy were already meeting with a financial advisor. I found emails. They used a shell company to try to move one of your smaller properties offshore. Didn't succeed, but they tried. I should have cried, but I didn't. My eyes felt dry. The part of me that used to ache for Clarice's approval was gone. "Can we do anything?" I asked. Lawrence hesitated. "We can open an investigation. If we pursue forgery formally, she'll face charges. And if we don't? We can quietly reverse most of it. Cancel the Malibu transfer, freeze any remaining joint access, get the bank to investigate the loan applications Jeremy filed using your old address." I thought for a long moment. I don't want her arrested. Not yet. I want her to look me in the eye first. "You're giving her a chance." "I'm giving myself a chance," I said, "to see if there's anything left of the girl I raised." We ended the call, and I sat there in silence. Documents spread before me like battlefield debris. Later that night, I took out a worn box of photographs from the closet. Clarice at age 6, hugging Robert's leg in the surf. Clarice at 13, throwing a coin into a fountain in Italy. She used to believe in magic. I wondered when she started believing only in money. The next morning, I went to the small public records office downtown. I walked in quietly, nodding to the clerk behind the counter, and requested a full ownership certificate for the Seabreeze Drive building. the one where Clarice and Jeremy had moved into the penthouse. The clerk printed it and handed it over. I traced my finger over the words, Owner, Robert Estates, LLC, and below that, Managing Authority, Selma Brooks. They were living in my building, using my water, my heat, my electricity. They didn't even know it. Back in the car, I let out a slow breath. That property had been one of Robert's pet projects. He used to joke, if we ever want to be anonymous landlords, this is the one to keep. He had bought it under an LLC for privacy. It was never in our personal names. Now it was the anchor, holding everything together. Back home, I called Officer Riley. She had helped me once before when I suspected an identity scam after Robert died. She had a quiet intelligence and a dislike for paperwork, but she was honest. Selma? She answered. It's been a while. I have a question about forged signatures, I said. She listened quietly as I explained. Not everything, but enough. Enough for her to know I wasn't a confused old woman. I'll look into it, she said. Off the record for now, but you might need to give me something hard. I have documents, originals and scans. And motive? They sold my home, I said, and they think I'm too old to fight back. There was a pause on the line. Then she said, Bring what you have. I'll make time. That night, I sat with a cup of tea, watching the sky darken over the ocean. It was the same view Clarice used to stare at as a teenager, sighing dramatically about leaving California. I wondered if she remembered that girl. I wondered if she'd recognize the woman I was becoming, because I wasn't going to vanish quietly. Not anymore. People like to talk about how grief changes you, but no one really talks about how betrayal rewires your silence. After that call from Clarice, I walked through the days like a ghost. Calm, invisible, and far more alert than anyone realized. I didn't tell a soul. I let the world keep thinking I was just a 71-year-old widow who'd been forced to downsize into the guest house behind her former mansion. Let them think I had nothing left. That was the gift. Even Maggie Tran, my neighbor of 30 years, had started speaking to me in the voice people use for the elderly who've lost everything. She meant well. Maggie had always been kind. Too kind. She'd shuffle over with warm banana bread or a casserole, offer a long sigh and say something like, I just can't believe she did that to you, Selma. And your car too? I'd nod slowly, sip my weak tea, and smile faintly. She needed the cash. Still, Maggie would whisper, leaning in, selling your beach house without even asking? That's not how family behaves. She wasn't wrong, but I had no intention of correcting her impression. I let her believe I was beaten, humble, clinging to a quiet life in a modest space. It gave me the perfect cover to work, because while they thought I was licking my wounds, I was signing documents, real documents this time, with Lawrence Kim. We met at the small coffee shop off the marina, the one with no cameras and a bell on the door that rang every time someone entered. He always arrived exactly on time, his briefcase already open, papers neatly tabbed, pen waiting. There's nothing Clarice can do now, he told me one morning, sipping his black coffee. All the property titles have been reviewed. The transfers are complete. Your name is back on every asset held by Robert Estates, LLC. As far as the government is concerned, you're not just solvent, you're powerful. I nodded. Good. Let them keep thinking I'm broken. I want Jeremy to believe he won. Lawrence raised an eyebrow. And Clarice? My hands folded around the cup. I don't know what I want with her yet, but I know what she needs. I went to the bank the next day, not through the front entrance, but the side, using the employee-only access that Lawrence had arranged. There, in a quiet office, I met a young woman named Lisa Ortega. She wore a blazer too big for her and had the cautious smile of someone who had seen one too many angry customers. When she saw my name, her eyes widened. You're Mrs. Brooks? Yes, I said calmly, sliding a folder across the desk. And you've been handling an account linked to my daughter's partner, Jeremy Dalton. She swallowed. Yes, he said you'd authorize the loan. We had all the documents. You were given forged signatures, I said gently. It's not your fault, but I need access to the full file. She hesitated, then tapped at her keyboard. A few clicks later, she turned the screen toward me. There it was, Jeremy Dalton's personal loan application using my previous address on Seabreeze Drive, and a letter allegedly signed by me. The signature looked like mine, but the date was off by 2 years. It was a detail Jeremy didn't know mattered. Can I make a copy? I asked. Lisa nodded. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I believe you, I said, but you may want to start documenting everything, because this might come back. Her fingers trembled as she handed over the copies. He was charming, really charming. Said he was building a health tech company, said he'd take care of his mother-in-law. I smiled at her, but there was no warmth in it. He takes care of no one. Back at home, I filed everything. I scanned the copies, uploaded them to my private drive, and printed 2 more sets. One for Lawrence, one for Officer Riley. The walls were closing in, and they didn't even feel it. Later that week, I saw Clarice from a distance. I had walked into the small grocery store near the cliffside when she turned the corner. She didn't see me. She was on the phone pushing a cart filled with bottled water, protein bars, and overpriced skincare. Yes, we're almost packed, she said into her phone, laughter bubbling up. Zurich's going to be amazing, and Mom's out of the picture. She's practically in a retirement shed. I stood between the cereal and canned soup aisle and watched her with the strange detachment of someone watching a movie scene they already knew the ending to. She walked right past me. She didn't even glance in my direction. I stepped outside before she saw me. The air smelled of salt and eucalyptus. My hands were steady. There was no anger left, only a kind of distant curiosity. I wondered what she would do when the tide turned. That evening, I met Lawrence again. She thinks I'm gone, I said. He handed me a packet. Here's the legal notice to rescind the property rights on the Malibu house. It was never hers to sell. Escrow hasn't finalized. We can stop it. And Jeremy? We've traced his use of the funds to 3 offshore accounts, but he slipped. 1 wire went to a U.S. entity. That's all we need. I nodded, eyes on the paper. Then let them enjoy tonight. Tomorrow, the letters go out. As I walked home under the amber dusk, Maggie waved from her porch. Selma, how are you holding up, sweetheart? I smiled back. Oh, you know, 1 step at a time. Inside, I poured myself a glass of cold water and stood at the window. They had no idea I was still here, still standing, still watching. They thought the old woman in the cottage had nothing left. They were wrong. At 6:00 a.m., the following Monday, Lawrence filed the first batch of papers. It was early enough to beat the banks, early enough that Jeremy would still be asleep, dreaming about Zurich, never suspecting that by lunchtime the ground would shift under his feet. I was already dressed when Lawrence called to confirm. Gray slacks, soft button-up, hair pulled back the way Robert always liked, neat and unfussy. This wasn't a day for mourning or memories. This was a day for precision. It's done, Lawrence said over the phone. The escrow process for the Malibu property is frozen. Title ownership flagged for legal dispute. They'll have to respond before the sale can proceed. Did the buyer say anything? Their attorney was confused, said Jeremy insisted everything was clean. They even brought him in as a co-signer. He used my daughter. He used your name, Lawrence corrected gently. He used everything. I hung up and walked to the window. Outside, the Pacific glistened, innocent and endless. Clarice always thought this house was about luxury, image. But Robert and I had chosen it for one reason. Its view never changed, a constant in a world where people did. Back at my table, I opened the second envelope Lawrence had left me last week. Inside were account summaries, bank records tied to Jeremy's activity. With Lisa Ortega's help, Lawrence had traced the paper trail from a modest U.S. account into an elaborate web. Cayman, Belize, Estonia. But then came the mistake. Jeremy had transferred $120,000 into a Nevada LLC using a fake EIN but real routing numbers. That detail alone was enough for federal scrutiny, and Lawrence knew exactly who to call. "We don't have to report it yet," he had said, "but we can dangle the rope." That rope now hung gently over Jeremy's head. Later that afternoon, I visited Lisa at the bank. I didn't go through the main lobby this time. I used the executive access, just as Robert had shown me years ago. She met me in the side hallway with nervous eyes. "Miss Brooks," she whispered. "He was just here, 30 minutes ago." "Jeremy?" She nodded. "He tried to withdraw a cashier's check from the Zurich account, but the system flagged the transaction. It's locked pending verification." He looked confused. I smiled without showing teeth. "Good. Confusion is the beginning of clarity." Lisa lowered her voice. "He said he needed the funds to pay for a property transition. But the account had 2 addresses attached to it. One was his new apartment. The other was yours." "He used my ID on the documents?" "Yes. The scan looked real." "Because it was," I said. "Stolen from my files after the funeral. He must have taken pictures." Lisa blinked. "Do you want to press charges?" "Not yet, but I need full printouts and a notarized letter confirming you witnessed the attempt." She hesitated only a second, then nodded. "I'll have it by tomorrow." Before leaving, I placed my hand on hers gently. "You're not in trouble, but I am going to ask you to be brave. You may be called later, not today, maybe not next week, but soon." Lisa swallowed hard but didn't flinch. "I'll be ready." As I stepped back into the bright California sun, I imagined Jeremy pacing in whatever high-rise they were renting, checking his phone, wondering why the transfer wasn't going through. I imagined him blaming Clarice, blaming the system, blaming anyone but himself. Back at the guest house, I picked up the landline. Lawrence answered on the second ring. "It's happening," I said. "Yes, and there's more." I waited. "One of our financial contacts called me. Jeremy used your old property as collateral in a separate investment scheme. He listed himself as your business proxy, but he didn't realize that the deed is filed under an LLC with corporate restrictions. So he over-leveraged an asset he doesn't own?" "Exactly. He signed loan terms using a fake operating agreement." "And what happens now?" "They'll begin internal fraud review. The firm he borrowed from isn't small. They'll come knocking." "Let them," I said. "Let him open the door." That evening, Maggie came by again with a pie. "Peach this time," she said, beaming. "You need something sweet. I hope you're doing okay." I invited her in, warmed the pie, made tea. We sat across from each other while she talked about her grandchildren, her aching knees, and how the neighborhood had changed. "You know," she said at one point, "I saw Clarice at the salon the other day. She looked radiant. Fancy purse, new hair color. She said she and Jeremy were leaving for Europe soon. I didn't want to ask." "But does she still talk to you?" "Sometimes," I said, "when she needs something." Maggie frowned. "That doesn't sit right." "She'll figure it out," I said softly. "Everyone does. Eventually." As Maggie left, she hugged me tightly. "You're a strong one, Selma. Stronger than you look." I closed the door and leaned against it. Not long ago, I might have cried hearing that. Now I only felt steel inside. After dark, I logged into my encrypted folder, scanned copies of the fake authorizations, the forged operating agreement, the fraudulent collateral listing, all filed. I labeled them carefully. Dalton, Phase 1. This wasn't vengeance, it was correction. At 9:30 p.m., my landline rang again. It was Lawrence. He tried to call me, he said. Jeremy. Yes, said he was clarifying a few minor details. He's sweating, Selma. Good, let him sweat. I poured myself a glass of water and stepped onto the porch. The sea was still moving, still whispering the same rhythm Robert and I had loved. A rhythm Clarice never listened to, not even once. She thought the storm had passed. She thought the guest house meant I had nothing left, but she forgot. I am the one who built the storm shelter. The call came just after 7 a.m. I had just finished making my oatmeal and was setting a spoon on the saucer when the phone rang, sharp and fast. Mom! Her voice cracked on the first word. No cheerful laugh this time, no smug declaration about Zurich, just a tremble, a hesitation. The unmistakable sound of someone who finally realized the room she was standing in had no floor. I didn't say anything right away. Mom, are you there? Yes, I replied evenly. I'm here. He's gone. I waited. Jeremy. He left in the middle of the night, took the suitcase, took the cash. I don't know where he is. Still, I said nothing. He said he was going to the airport, but when I checked, the tickets were canceled. He blocked me, Mom. He blocked my number. I kept stirring the oatmeal, slow and steady. The spoon scraping the bowl was the only sound on my end. Everything's frozen. The Malibu house deal. Lawrence canceled it. The money's tied up. The bank won't talk to me. Lisa won't even return my calls. I don't know what's going on. He said you gave us permission for all of it. Did I? I said, setting the spoon down. Her breath hitched. Didn't you? No, Clarice, I didn't. There was silence. Then softly, almost childlike, he said it was all approved. He said you'd signed everything. And did you check? I trusted him. He said it was for both of us. I moved to the window, staring at the stretch of driveway leading up to the main house. I could see the curtains drawn shut in what used to be the master bedroom. They'd moved in the same week I'd moved out, as if trading places in some twisted game of musical chairs. Mom, she whispered, I think he used me. I stayed quiet. I needed her to say it all. He told me he'd pay off his debt. Said Zurich would be a fresh start. He said you didn't care about the house anymore, that you were ready to let go of all of it. And you believed that? She hesitated. Yes, I did. My voice remained calm. Do you remember the day after your father's funeral? Yes. You came to me with a stack of papers. You said they were to release funeral funds. I remember. You had me sign something I didn't understand, and I did it because I was grieving, and I trusted you. Her voice broke. I didn't know what Jeremy was planning, but you handed him the pen. The silence that followed wasn't just silence. It was a rupture. Finally, she said, I made a mistake. No, Clarice. You made a series of choices. You stopped seeing me as your mother and started seeing me as a key. Her breath was shallow now. I'm so sorry. I didn't answer. Not yet. I don't know where to go. I have no money, no car. He maxed out the card I thought was mine. I called the credit company and they said it was under your name. I didn't even know that. Now you do. I heard a sob on the other end. Can I come to you? I closed my eyes. Of course. She didn't expect that. You can come, I repeated, but not to ask for money, not to be rescued. You can come because you need a place to sit and think, to feel what it's like to have nothing but your name. I don't know who I am anymore. That's a good place to start. When she arrived, her eyes were red and puffy. She wore the same beige coat she always bragged had been on sale in Milan. Her designer purse looked oddly out of place, hanging limply from her arm. There was no car. She'd walked from the transit stop. I opened the door and stepped aside. She didn't hug me. I didn't offer one. She stood in the doorway for a moment. You look different. I feel different. We sat across from each other in the same kitchen where she used to ask for second helpings of pancakes. Now she couldn't even look at the food on the table. "I'm not proud of what I did," she said. "I'm not asking for shame," I replied. "I'm asking for honesty." She nodded, clutching a tissue. "I thought he loved me." "He loved your access." Her lip quivered. "And you?" "I loved you," I said, "more than I love safety. That's why I signed without reading. That's why I trusted you." Her tears fell freely now, and I broke that. "You passed it along from one betrayal to another." She looked up. "How do I fix it?" I studied her face. It was worn, tired, but there was a softness in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. "You start by being uncomfortable," I said, "by not reaching for the easy thing, by not calling someone else to clean the mess." She nodded. "And you listen," I continued. "You listen to every small truth you've been ignoring." That night, I offered her the pull-out couch. She accepted without protest. In the early hours of the morning, I walked past the living room. She was curled under an old quilt, clutching one of the throw pillows she used to call hideous. Now it seemed like comfort. Before I went to bed, I opened the drawer beside me and pulled out a small velvet pouch. Inside was a necklace Robert had given me on our 20th anniversary. Gold, with a blue stone in the center. Clarice had asked to borrow it once for a gala years ago. I had said no, not because of the event, but because she didn't understand its weight. She would now. Clarice was still asleep when I made my morning tea. I moved quietly through the kitchen, not because I wanted to let her rest, but because I needed the silence to think. I retrieved the small travel bag Robert had used for decades, the kind with a stiff leather handle and a scuffed corner from our last trip together. Tucked inside, beneath an old shaving kit and a neatly folded map of Santa Fe, was what I had remembered, a small black envelope with a red wax seal. It was one of Robert's quirks. He sealed everything like it was the 1800s. I sat at the kitchen table and held the envelope for a long time before I opened it. His handwriting on the front was simple. Selma, for when she's ready to know everything. Inside was a short note, no longer than a grocery list. Sel, if this is the day you feared would come, then she must be in pieces. Do not scold her. She will be drowning already. Give her the key. Tell her where to go. Let her find what I left. Only then will she understand what real value looks like. R. Below the note was a single silver key, thin and long with an engraving on the side. SDB 119B, a safe deposit box. I stared at it for a moment, then closed the envelope and tucked it into my cardigan pocket. When Clarice woke, she was groggy and pale. Her eyes were puffy and her voice had no edge. She sat across from me at the table and wrapped her hands around a mug like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. "I didn't sleep," she said. "I didn't expect you to." "Jeremy used my name to apply for more credit cards. Some of the debt is in my name. Some of it I don't even recognize. He's been building this for longer than you realize." She nodded slowly. "I feel like a ghost in my own life." "That's a good start." Her brows lifted slightly. "That's good? It means you're no longer pretending." We sat in silence. I watched her stare at her tea. I knew this version of her was unfamiliar to even herself. There was no designer scarf today, no sparkle in her tone, just rawness, and maybe, for the first time in years, humility. I placed the key gently on the table between us. She stared at it. "What's this?" "A key to a safe deposit box." Her fingers reached for it, but she hesitated. "Where?" "Downtown, First Guardian Bank." Her eyes narrowed. "What's in it?" I held her gaze. "Your father left it for you." She pulled her hand back. "For me?" "Yes, but only if you got to this point on your own." Her voice wavered. "What if I'm not ready?" "Then you'll sit here, Drink your tea and come back to it when you are." She nodded, tears springing to her eyes again. "I want to know. I don't want to keep pretending." We drove into town in silence. The car hummed along the coastal road, the ocean glinting beside us. Clarice stared out the window, hands clasped tightly in her lap. I could see her jaw tense each time we passed a familiar place. The bookstore she once loved, the bakery where we used to share coffee before school. At the bank, we walked through the lobby side by side. The manager, a gray-haired woman named Deborah, greeted me with a warm smile. "Miss Brooks," she said, "we weren't sure you'd ever come for this. It's time." She led us into the back, down the hallway lined with steel vault doors. Clarice glanced around like she had never been in a place like this before, which of course she hadn't. Inside the viewing room, Deborah slid open the box with a mechanical clink and set it on the table. "I'll leave you two alone." When she was gone, Clarice slowly lifted the lid. Inside was a wooden jewelry box. Not fancy, just polished oak with a brass clasp. She opened it, and I watched her face shift. There, nestled in black velvet, was a necklace, a bracelet, and a matching ring. All antique, all carefully preserved. Each piece shimmered with aquamarine and delicate goldwork. "These were Grandma's," she whispered. "I remember them from pictures." "She wore them at her wedding. Robert had them cleaned and reset before you were born. He wanted you to have them one day, but only if you understood they weren't meant to be sold. They were meant to be kept." Clarice's hands trembled as she touched the necklace. "There's something else," I said. She looked beneath the jewelry and found a letter. She unfolded it slowly. "Clarice," it began. "If you are reading this, then your mother believes you're ready. I hope she's right. These pieces belong to your grandmother. She came to this country with a single trunk and nothing more. This set was her treasure. Not for its value, but because it reminded her of who she was before the world tried to take her voice. You will be offered many things in life that shine, but not everything that shines will last. Learn to know the difference." Clarice wiped her face and folded the letter carefully. "I don't deserve this." "You don't have to," I said gently. "You only have to grow from it." We left the bank without a word. I could tell her mind was working in new directions. The woman who had once measured worth by the size of a house or the tag on a purse was now clutching a velvet box as if it contained her breath. Back at the house, she placed the box on the coffee table and sat quietly beside it. "Thank you," she said, "for not throwing me away." "You're my daughter," I replied, "but that doesn't mean I'll let you keep breaking windows and blaming the weather." She let out a shaky breath that turned into a laugh, the first genuine sound I'd heard from her in weeks. That night, Clarice barely spoke. She sat in the corner of the guest house living room, her arms wrapped tightly around her knees, staring at the wooden box Robert had left behind. The jewelry lay untouched inside, gleaming softly under the lamplight. She looked at it the way someone might look at a mirror after too many years of refusing to. I let her sit. Some things couldn't be rushed. Not grief, not guilt, not the slow crumbling of denial. Around 9 p.m., I brought her a warm cup of milk. She took it in both hands and nodded her thanks, but still didn't speak. Her eyes were red-rimmed, the skin around them puffy and exhausted. Whatever sleep she'd gotten the night before hadn't repaired anything. Some kinds of ruined sleep can't fix. After a few quiet sips, she whispered, "I wanted to sell the necklace." I sat down across from her, calm and still. "Back when Jeremy was panicking about Zurich," she continued, "he told me to check your drawers for anything that looked old or valuable. I found the red velvet pouch. I didn't even know what it was at first, just something pretty. He said, 'Great, we'll appraise it and move it fast.' I didn't even hesitate. I didn't respond. I waited. I didn't care what it meant to you. I only saw numbers." She looked down into the cup. That's all I ever saw these past few years. Numbers, value, leverage. I became someone I don't even recognize. Maybe Jeremy brought it out of me, or maybe it was always there. Why did you stop? I asked. Her voice cracked. Because I saw you living here, quietly, like none of it mattered. You were supposed to be the one who fell apart, but you didn't. And now I'm the one unraveling. I leaned forward, resting my hands on my knees. I've already fallen apart, Clarice. You just weren't looking when it happened. She closed her eyes. I used to think you were weak, passive, that after Dad died, you gave up. I didn't give up, I said softly. I stepped back. But why? Why not fight back earlier? Because I wanted to see who you'd become when you thought I had nothing. The weight of that landed hard. She swallowed, the tears returning. Jeremy told me to ask you to sign over the accounts, the car, even the life insurance leftovers. He said it would simplify the process, that it would help me protect your assets from tax complications. And you believed him? I wanted to, she said, the words cracking apart. I wanted to believe someone had a plan, that I didn't have to think for myself. I nodded slowly. That's how control works. It wears the mask of care. She rubbed her temples. I thought I was smart, but I don't even know who I married. You married someone who saw the holes in you and poured himself into them. Her head dropped forward, shoulders shaking with quiet sobs. I let him convince me that you were the obstacle, that you were sitting on money, power, history, and doing nothing with it. Because I didn't brag about it, I said. It made me useless. She nodded. I told myself that. Did it feel true? Only when I was scared. And now? She looked up at me, eyes swollen and glassy. Now I feel like I'm standing in a house I set on fire, asking you if we can still light a candle. I reached over and gently took the mug from her hands, setting it aside. You're not past the point of return, I said, but you are past the point of pretending. Her lips trembled. I want to start over. Then stop looking for the old door. We sat in silence for a while, letting the words hang between us. I watched her shoulders rise and fall, her body slowly releasing what it had held in too long. Ambition, pride, resentment, shame. It all had to come out before anything else could begin. Finally, she asked, what happens to people like Jeremy? They disappear or they get caught, but either way, they always leave damage. Do you think he loved me? I think he loved using you. She flinched but didn't argue. I reached into the small drawer beside my chair and pulled out a tiny velvet pouch. This one was white, soft, worn from age. I placed it on the table between us. Your grandmother gave this to me when I was about your age, I said. Inside is a brooch, not worth much, but she said it carried the weight of 3 generations. She told me to give it to you only when I felt you understood that legacy isn't money, it's memory. Clarice opened it carefully. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the small silver pin, shaped like a branch of olive leaves. She held it like it might vanish. I don't deserve this, she whispered again. No, I said, but you're not the same person who tried to sell a necklace for a plane ticket, and that matters. She stared at the brooch, then back at me. I want to earn my name back. Then start small. Do one right thing, then another. She nodded. First, I said gently, go to sleep. She gave a tearful laugh. You're still telling me when bedtime is? Always, I said, smiling faintly. She got up slowly and crossed the room, holding the brooch like it was something sacred. Before disappearing down the hallway, she turned back to me. Thank you for not turning away. I looked at her fully, letting her see the steadiness in my eyes. I never stopped being your mother, I said. I just stopped being your shield. That night, the house was quiet. No screaming, no threats. Just the soft sound of someone finally sitting in the wreckage of her own choices and not trying to run from it. And that, I thought, was where rebuilding begins. The next morning, the doorbell rang before breakfast. I was still folding the linens from the guest cot when I heard the familiar sound. 2 short chimes, then one long one. Robert used to say it sounded like a question mark. I opened the door expecting Maggie or maybe a delivery, but when I saw who stood on the other side, I nearly dropped the stack of sheets. Tina, Clarice's college roommate, her old partner in everything before Jeremy came along. She looked older, more grounded. Hair cut short into a sleek bob, simple clothes, a canvas bag slung across her shoulder. But the smile, wary, sad, and still sincere, was exactly the same. "Hi, Mrs. Brooks." I stepped aside without a word. She walked in slowly, like someone entering sacred ground. She looked around the guest house and then back at me. "I heard about the house. I had a feeling she might be here." "You came a long way," I said. "Not far enough," she replied quietly. Just then, Clarice appeared at the edge of the hallway, wrapped in the old cream shawl I kept over the couch. Her face froze when she saw Tina. "You," she whispered, "what are you doing here?" Tina blinked, then exhaled. "I'm here because I should have said something years ago." Clarice stood still, eyes wide. She didn't run, didn't hide. She just stood there, like a statue of the version of herself that didn't know how to feel anything anymore. "You told me you never wanted to see me again," Clarice said. "And I believed you meant it," Tina replied, walking slowly toward her. "But then I read your name on a business article last month. It mentioned Jeremy, said you were moving to Zurich, and something in me just screamed, 'Don't let her leave without knowing the truth.'" Clarice folded her arms. "What truth?" "The one I should have told you the moment it happened, that I wasn't just the ex-friend with bad instincts like Jeremy claimed. I was one of his first targets." Clarice's expression flickered. "What are you talking about?" "In Barcelona. He said he was investing in a small art collective. He used my savings to cover licensing fees. I was young, too trusting. Sound familiar?" Clarice's arms dropped slowly to her sides. "I didn't tell you then," Tina continued, "because I knew you wouldn't believe me. And you didn't. You cut me off, blocked me, said I was jealous. And maybe part of me was, but mostly I was scared for you." Clarice's mouth parted, but no words came out. Tina stepped forward and pulled a flash drive from her bag. "I have recordings, screenshots. One night a few months ago, I got a message from a woman in Vienna. Same pattern, same man, different name. He reused the same lies, the same offshore account. We compared notes. Then we found more women. 4. All of us lost something." I stepped forward and gently took the drive from her hand. "He has a script," Tina said, almost word for word. "Pretend empathy. Talk about protecting her from her family. Promise a new life abroad. Then suggest moving assets to avoid tax complications." That line should have been trademarked. Clarice covered her face with both hands. Her breath came in shallow gasps, and she slowly sank into the armchair. "I told myself he loved me," she whispered through her fingers. "Even when he changed my passwords, even when he said I should keep my distance from Mom, that she was too attached to the past." Tina crouched in front of her. "He was good. You weren't stupid. You were isolated." Clarice shook her head. "I believed everything he said, and I dragged my mother through it." Tears came then, not angry or performative, but silent and deep, the kind that don't even wrinkle the face. They just fall, clean and terrible. Tina reached into her bag again. "I have his fake IDs. He used one of them to lease an apartment in Geneva. I traced the payments. He didn't go to Zurich." "Where did he go?" I asked. Tina looked up at me. "Prague, under the name Philip Rousseau." I nodded slowly. "We'll forward this to the attorney." Clarice sat still for a long time, absorbing the weight of what she had let into her life. Then she looked at Tina. "Why now?" "Because I got tired of being silent," Tina said, "and because I never stopped caring, even after you threw me away." Clarice closed her eyes. "I'm sorry." Tina sat beside her. I know. They sat in silence, the kind that finally starts to repair instead of destroy. Later that afternoon, I emailed everything to Lawrence. The audio files, the screenshots, the ID photos, the banking trail. Lawrence responded within the hour. This is gold. It's enough to bring civil fraud charges. He won't be able to cross another border without red flags. I watched Clarice as she read that message on my laptop screen. Her shoulders didn't shake. She didn't cry again. She just closed the lid, turned to me and asked, "What do I do next?" "You stop surviving," I said, "and start standing." Tina left in the evening. Clarice walked her to the end of the street, both of them quiet but no longer brittle. When she returned, her face was calm in a way I hadn't seen since she was a child. "I don't want him to be the last chapter," she said. "Then write something better." She nodded, then walked into the guest room, her steps light, her back finally straight. That night, I tucked the flash drive into Robert's old filing cabinet right next to his will and the first love letter he ever sent me. The truth had come back to our doorstep, not with sirens or vengeance, but with evidence, forgiveness, and the soft thud of old friends returning. 3 days after Tina's visit, the final set of documents was ready. I sat with Lawrence in the same corner of the coffee shop we'd always used, quiet, anonymous, and old enough not to attract tech types with laptops and oversized headphones. He slid the envelope across the table with the kind of deliberate care reserved for something far heavier than paper. "This is the legal notice for lease termination," he said, "signed by you as managing authority of Robert Estates, LLC. It's structured to remove them under tenant fraud and identity misrepresentation." I nodded without looking at it. "Send it." "Are you sure you want to go through with this now?" he asked. "You've got Clarice back. You don't have to throw gasoline on what's already burning." I looked up at him and answered plainly. "She needs to see what consequences look like. Not punishment, clarity." He gave a long, quiet sigh, then stood. "It'll be delivered today, certified, time-stamped, and unmissable." That afternoon, I didn't tell Clarice anything. I let her help Maggie repot a few geraniums out front, hands deep in soil and conversation about things that had nothing to do with money, Zurich, or betrayal. It was the first time I'd seen her laugh in weeks. But across town, in a high-rise where she no longer lived, a courier stepped into the elevator with a white envelope bearing my signature. Inside, in bold print at the top, notice of termination, Robert Estates, LLC. Below that, tenants listed under Jeremy Dalton and Clarice Brooks are hereby served official notice for vacating unit Ducour 12P, Seabreeze Drive, due to unauthorized subletting, misrepresentation, and fraudulent use of third-party assets. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't theatrical. It was just true. Clarice found out the next morning. She stood on the front steps holding the envelope in both hands, her lips parted, brows drawn tight. I was sitting in the sunroom with a book I had no intention of finishing. She didn't speak right away. Finally, she stepped inside. "Was this you?" I closed the book. "It was the company." She gave me a look. "Yes," I said. "It was me. You sent me a legal eviction. I sent one to a fraudulent tenant who no longer holds rights to the property." Her face twisted. "Mom." "No," I interrupted calmly. "You called me Mom again only after he left you. But when you needed my name to move into the penthouse, I was a ghost. I was paperwork, a signature, nothing more." Her eyes welled, but I didn't stop. "You moved into that apartment without asking, used my name, signed things you didn't read, let him build an empire on foundations that weren't his to touch. Now you're holding a letter you earned." She dropped onto the nearest chair, the envelope limp in her hands. "The name of the company, I didn't realize. Robert Estates. It was right there the whole time." I nodded. "Your father put it in plain sight. You just weren't looking." "I thought he was the one who left safety nets for me, but really he left them for you." "No," I said gently. He left them for both of us. But only one of us saw them as responsibility, not inheritance. Clarice stared down at the document. Her fingers ran along the edge as if trying to soften it. I guess I don't live there anymore. No, I said, but you're here, and that matters more. She looked up. So what happens now? You'll write a response to the notice, a formal acknowledgement. You'll return the building keycards and access credentials. She nodded slowly. And then, I continued, you'll write another letter. Not for the company, for me. Her brows lifted. What do you mean? You'll write down what you think happened, what you did, what you see now that you couldn't before. I won't grade it. I won't reply. But you'll put it in your own handwriting, because someday you'll forget how clear today feels, and I want you to have proof that you understood. Clarice took a deep breath. Okay. That night, I found her sitting at the small desk by the window, a blank sheet of paper in front of her, a pen poised, hovering. I don't know where to start, she whispered. Start at the part where you stopped hearing me, I said. The next morning, I mailed a copy of the eviction letter to Officer Riley. Attached were the banking documents from Lisa, Tina's recordings, and the screenshots tracing Jeremy's financial web. An hour later, Riley called. This is enough. His fraud is official. He's flagged internationally now. What happens if he tries to come back? I asked. He'll be detained, at minimum. Good. Clarice sat across from me when I hung up. Her face was pale but clear. I don't want to run anymore, she said. You don't have to. She picked up the letter she had written, 4 handwritten pages in tidy lines. She didn't hand it to me. She folded it carefully and placed it in the old jewelry box Robert had left for her. I want to remember what this cost me, she said, not to punish myself, just to never repeat it. You will forget, I said. That's human, but you'll come back to it. Clarice smiled faintly. I think Dad would have liked that. I stood and walked to the window. The sky was streaked with morning gold. The Pacific shimmered like nothing had ever gone wrong. He would have liked you now, I said, very much. The knock came just past noon. Not the light, hesitant kind. Not Maggie with cookies. Not the mailman with envelopes. This was heavier, male, impatient. I didn't need to look through the peephole to know who it was. Clarice stood at the edge of the hallway, frozen mid-step with a dish towel still in her hand. Her eyes met mine, wide and uncertain. Stay here, I said quietly. I opened the door slowly. There he stood, Jeremy Dalton, tanned, unshaven. The sleek charm he once wore like a designer coat now hung wrinkled and desperate. His shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, his jaw stubbled, and a forced smile tugged at lips that didn't mean it. Selma, he said, spreading his arms slightly like I might hug him. Finally. I said nothing. He took a step forward but saw I hadn't moved an inch. His smile twitched. I've been trying to reach Clarice, he said. She won't return my messages. And I heard you've been getting involved in things you don't understand. I raised an eyebrow. He continued. You've always been kind to me. I think maybe there's been a misunderstanding. She told me you were having memory lapses, that you might have signed things you forgot about. I don't blame you. I just think we should talk, calmly. Talk, I repeated. Yes, he said, stepping just over the threshold. I'll explain everything. We'll fix this. No need to escalate. At that moment, Clarice appeared behind me. When he saw her, his whole tone shifted. His voice turned softer, more pleading. Baby, he said, I didn't mean for it to go this way. You know how complicated these deals were. I needed your name to move a few things, temporarily. You remember, right? Clarice looked at him, silent. Jeremy's voice cracked with urgency. Zurich's off the table, but we can figure out something else. We'll get another place, start fresh. We don't need her permission. You and I, we always found a way. Clarice stepped beside me, trembling but upright. "I'm not going anywhere with you," she said. "Not now. Not ever." He blinked. "You're upset. That's normal. But this is your mother's manipulation." "She's not the one who emptied my accounts," Clarice said. "She's not the one who forged half a dozen documents or used my identity to open credit lines." Jeremy's smile dropped. "That's not how this happened." "No?" she said. "Then why are there transfers under your name to a fake LLC in Prague? Why did Tina find 4 other women with the same story?" His jaw tightened. "I told you. That was before us. It had nothing to do with you." She stepped forward now, her voice sharper. "Everything about you has been a performance, and I believed it. I helped you lie. I lied for you. But I'm done." Jeremy looked between us, his eyes narrowing. "You're both making a mistake. If you think a few screenshots and sob stories will hold up, you're wrong. I've worked with lawyers who eat this kind of stuff for breakfast." I tilted my head. "You might want to call one of them soon." His attention snapped to me. "What's that supposed to mean?" I reached into the table by the door and pulled out a plain manila envelope. "I thought you might come," I said. "So I prepared this." I handed it to him. He took it, opened it, and scanned the contents. His face drained. Inside, a copy of the formal eviction notice, certified records from the bank proving identity misrepresentation, notarized letters from Lisa and Tina, and a printed email chain between him and a contact in Prague discussing offshore asset shielding. This isn't admissible," he stammered. "You can't just print things and call it proof." "Maybe not in court," I said. "But in a fraud investigation, in front of Officer Riley, it's more than enough to trigger a warrant." He clutched the envelope tighter. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" He stared at me for a long time, then turned back to Clarice. "You're going to regret this. I'm the only one who ever really—" She cut him off. "You never loved me. You loved what I could unlock." Jeremy's eyes hardened. "Fine. You think you're clever? Good luck paying back that Zurich loan. You're still liable for part of it." Clarice didn't blink. "I've already contacted the bank. They've opened a fraud case. Your name is on every application. My signature? Forged. That's already confirmed." He turned toward me one last time. "You really think this makes you a hero? You ruined your own daughter's marriage." "No," I said evenly. "She walked out of that fire on her own." He stared a moment longer. Then slowly he tucked the envelope under his arm and stepped back. "I'll be seeing both of you again." I smiled. "Not if the airport sees you first." He left without another word. We watched him walk down the path, shoulders tense, steps fast and clumsy. For a man so used to controlling every room, the open air didn't suit him. I shut the door. Clarice leaned back against the wall, her whole body shaking, not from fear, but release. "You didn't even raise your voice," she whispered. "I didn't have to," I said. "I already took everything he thought he had." She smiled through the tears. That night, she slept soundly for the first time. 2 days after Jeremy left our doorstep for the last time, Clarice and I walked together into Lawrence Kim's office. The same one Robert used to sit in, turning over contracts with a pen he never used unless he was sure. The same office where I'd signed away my rights years ago, blinded by grief and misplaced trust. But this time, I walked in with my head high, and my daughter beside me. Lawrence stood as we entered. "Ladies," he greeted warmly, "please sit." Clarice hesitated before taking her seat. She clutched the velvet pouch in her hands, the one with her grandmother's brooch, the letter from Robert, and her own handwritten pages folded carefully inside. It had become her anchor. "I'm ready to know everything," she said softly. Lawrence glanced at me for confirmation. I nodded. He opened a large leather folder and pulled out a thick stack of documents, each one clipped and labeled. Then he reached beneath the desk and set down a sleek, black laptop. "Let's start with the foundation," he said. "Your father didn't just leave a will. He left a protective architecture, a system of legal firewalls around every major asset." Clarice leaned forward. "Robert Estates LLC," Lawrence continued, "isn't just a holding company. It's a layered entity. The beach house, the Seabreeze Drive building, the Santa Fe retreat, even the market investments, they're all under this structure. And the named controller from the beginning was your mother." Clarice's eyes widened. "Even when I thought I had everything, she still had control?" "Not just control," Lawrence said, "ownership, but invisible by design. Your father wanted to ensure no one, not even a family member, could dismantle it out of ignorance or manipulation." He tapped the laptop and opened a series of files, scanned deeds, transfer authorizations, bank agreements, insurance terms. Clarice watched, stunned, as each asset appeared, each one once believed to be hers or Jeremy's to spend. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why didn't he just say this to me?" "Because he didn't want you to carry entitlement," I answered. "He wanted you to carry understanding." Lawrence nodded. "Robert told me once, I'm not building wealth for my daughter. I'm building a safety net in case she ever forgets her values, and I'm giving Selma the scissors to cut her free from it if she needs to." Clarice looked down. Her hands tightened on the pouch. Lawrence slid another document forward. "This is your original power of attorney agreement, the one you presented to the bank. It was drafted by a notary in New Mexico who has since been disbarred. Your signature was traced, not signed." Clarice closed her eyes. "He forged it." "Yes," Lawrence said, "multiple times. Jeremy used your name on 4 different entities, some domestic, some international. He drained accounts through structured loans, then moved the money through shell companies. But because of how the holding company is built, the only thing he really touched was air." She blinked. "What do you mean?" Lawrence smiled slightly. "Smoke and mirrors. He thought he'd gutted the house, but the walls were just illusions. The real structure was elsewhere." Clarice looked at me. "You knew." "I suspected," I said. "After your father passed, I asked Lawrence to quietly run yearly audits. I never told you because I didn't want you living like someone under surveillance." She exhaled. "Maybe you should have." "No," I said. "I had to let you live freely, even if it hurt me, especially then." Lawrence cleared his throat. "As of this morning, Jeremy Dalton is officially flagged with a federal warrant. Officer Riley forwarded the case to the Department of Financial Crimes. He won't be able to open an account or board an international flight under any name." Clarice nodded slowly. "He'll run." "Maybe," I said. "But now every door he knocks on will be waiting with a lock." There was a long pause. Then Clarice reached into her pouch and pulled out her letter, the 4 handwritten pages she'd poured herself into after the eviction notice. She laid them on the desk. "I know it's not a legal document," she said, "but I needed to bring it, to leave something honest behind." Lawrence accepted it with gentle hands. "More important than most of what I see, actually." She turned to me. "Mom," she said, "I want to give something back." I tilted my head. "What do you mean?" "I want to forfeit any future inheritance. All of it. Not out of guilt, because I don't want my story to be about what I took. I want it to be about what I gave." Lawrence looked up, surprised. "I'd like to request that everything, every remaining asset, be placed in a family trust. But not for me. For something bigger." I studied her carefully. She wasn't performing. She meant every word. "What do you have in mind?" I asked. Clarice swallowed. "A retreat for women like me. Women who were manipulated, isolated, used, and then left to rebuild. Women who need quiet places to get their voices back." My chest tightened. "The beach house," she continued. "It should be that place. Where I once tried to erase you, maybe others can come to remember themselves." Lawrence blinked twice. I can draw up the framework for a 501c3, tax-exempt, protected. Clarice nodded. Please. I reached across the desk and took her hand. You're not who you were a month ago, I said. I hope not. I smiled. Then you're already worth more than what you gave up. As we left the office, the afternoon sun filtered through the windows in long, golden lines. Clarice didn't look behind her once. She walked out into the light like someone who wasn't running anymore. And for the first time since Robert died, I felt the weight of what we had built together. Not the money, not the properties, but the net strong enough to catch someone we loved. Just in time. The day after our meeting at Lawrence's office, Clarice stood in the kitchen tying back her hair with one of my old elastic bands. Her shoulders were square, her eyes clear. There was no designer bag on her arm, no frantic tapping on her phone. Just a woman making coffee at sunrise with quiet intention. She handed me a cup without a word, then sat across the table. I've applied for a job, she said. I raised an eyebrow. Where? A nonprofit in the city. They do workforce development for women re-entering the job market after abuse or financial trauma. They're hiring someone to help with intake and community outreach. That's social work, Clarice. She smiled gently. I know, and it pays barely enough for groceries. But I want to start where I belong, not where I used to pretend I did. I looked at her for a long time. What changed? She took a breath. I sat with that letter I wrote you. Reread every word. It didn't make me feel better. It made me feel responsible. Like I finally had a mirror I couldn't look away from. And then I thought about Lisa. I nodded. The bank employee. She's in debt too, Clarice said. Single mom, 2 jobs, barely any sleep. She helped me because she thought she was helping the right people, but she's being pulled under by the same kinds of games Jeremy played on me. I want to help her get out. You spoke with her? Yes. I met her at the cafe yesterday. I offered to help her restructure her debt and referred her to a nonprofit financial planner. She cried. I cried. Then we laughed about how messy adulthood is. I smiled. Sounds like you did more than cry. Sounds like you showed up. Clarice nodded. I'm tired of being someone who gets forgiven but never earns it. I want to live differently. I want to live with integrity now. Then start with today. She took a folded piece of paper from her bag and slid it across the table. It was her formal request to be removed from the family trust. I've already spoken to Lawrence. This is my signature. I don't want loopholes, no clauses. I'm walking away from all claims. You don't have to do that to prove anything. She shook her head. I'm not doing it for proof. I'm doing it for peace. I held the paper without unfolding it, not because I doubted her, but because I didn't need to read it. Her actions had already said more than signatures ever could. That afternoon, we went for a walk along the cliffs. The wind tugged at our sleeves, the sea below roaring like it remembered every word ever shouted from broken hearts. Clarice turned to me. I want to go back there, to the house. I looked at her. Why? Because I think it's time to open it for what it was meant to be. The house on the bluff hadn't changed. The white paint still gleamed under the sun. The tall windows still caught the golden light at just the right angle. But stepping through the front door that morning, it no longer felt like a stage for showing off. It felt like a clean slate. Clarice walked in slowly, her footsteps echoing across the wide oak floors. She paused in the middle of the great room, eyes moving over the empty furniture Jeremy had left behind, the couch with the wine stain he'd once blamed on a neighbor. She turned to me. It feels hollow. Hollow isn't always bad, I said. Sometimes it means there's space to build something new. She nodded. We walked through the rooms one by one. The kitchen where Robert once stood, barefoot, slicing mangoes. The hallway where Clarice used to dance with her headphones in, thinking no one was watching. The bedroom with the wide glass doors, now holding only dust and distant waves. We stopped in the sunroom at the back of the house. Clarice pressed her hand against the glass. "This room," she said. "This is where it should start." "What do you mean?" "The retreat. This could be the gathering room. Women can sit here, talk, cry, journal, just be." Her voice was soft but certain. "I want to name it the Olive Room, after the brooch." My throat tightened. "That would have made your grandmother proud." Clarice turned to me, her eyes bright. "Can we start it? Really start it?" "Yes," I said. "We'll call Lawrence tomorrow, start the nonprofit registration, draft the mission, I'll seed the fund, you'll write the programming." "And we make it free," she added quickly. "No woman should have to pay to feel safe." "Agreed." She looked around again, her expression transforming. "We'll need chairs, plants, tea sets, journals, a bookcase, pillows, everything soft, everything quiet." I let her speak. She wasn't just imagining it, she was building it in real time. I saw her come back to life with every word. Later that evening, we sat on the back deck facing the sea. The sun sank slowly behind the horizon, casting streaks of amber and lavender across the sky. Maggie arrived with a thermos of tea and 2 folding chairs under her arm. "You're reopening the house?" she asked. Clarice smiled. "We're repurposing it." Maggie settled in beside us. "About time this place was used for something good." "We're starting a retreat," Clarice explained, "for women who've been financially manipulated, women trying to rebuild." Maggie's eyes glistened. "You're giving them what you wish you'd had." Clarice nodded. "Exactly." The 3 of us sat in silence, letting the waves speak for a while. Then Clarice turned to me. "I don't want to just make amends, Mom. I want to make meaning." "You already are," I said. She pulled the velvet box from her bag, the necklace, the brooch, her letter still tucked inside. She set it down gently on the deck rail. "I'm ready to let the past breathe," she said. And I believed her. The sun had just begun its slow climb over the horizon when Clarice joined me on the back deck of the beach house. She wore a soft gray sweater, hair pulled into a low ponytail, feet bare against the warm wood. In her hands was a steaming mug of coffee. Black now, no syrups, no fluff. A small change, but one of many. I had already been sitting there, watching the waves roll in. The sky was a wash of soft pinks and quiet golds, the kind of morning Robert used to call a beginning that whispers instead of shouts. Clarice sat beside me, pulled her knees up to her chest, and let out a breath that seemed to carry years with it. "I used to think this view was wasted on you," she said. I turned slightly. "You'd just sit here," she continued, "not taking selfies, not posting about it, not hosting dinner parties. I thought you were letting it go to waste." "And now?" "Now I think you were the only one who ever really saw it." We sat in silence for a while, letting the ocean fill the spaces between our words. The wind carried the scent of salt and rosemary from the garden below. "I start the job Monday," she said eventually. "They offered me the entry-level position, full-time, modest pay, but benefits." "You sound proud." "I am," she said. "I think Dad would have been too." "He is," I replied. "In every structure he left behind. He didn't just build safety nets, he built maps back to ourselves." Clarice turned toward me. "I want to visit his resting place. Soon. I want to tell him I finally get it." "He already knows." She smiled, then reached into the pocket of her cardigan and pulled out a folded brochure. "I made this," she said, handing it to me. On the front was a photo of the sunroom, now redecorated with soft chairs, warm light, and a long wooden table with a vase of lavender. At the top, in elegant letters, "The Olive Room Retreat, a place to reclaim your voice." I ran my fingers over the paper. "You did this?" She nodded. "Tina helped me with the branding. Lisa helped with the testimonials. We're going to offer workshops, counseling, quiet space, and for every woman who walks through that door, there will be no judgment, just dignity. I looked at her, really looked, and in that moment, I didn't see the girl who once laughed about selling my house. I saw the woman who was rebuilding something she'd nearly destroyed, layer by layer, with care and intention. "Have you told your friends?" I asked. "Not all," she said. "But the ones who matter, no. And Maggie already asked if she could host a journaling group here." I laughed. "That sounds like Maggie." Clarice reached into her tote and pulled out a small wooden box. "What's that?" She opened it slowly. Inside was the jewelry Robert had left her. "I've decided to keep it," she said. "Not sell, not donate. Just keep. So one day, if I ever have a daughter of my own, I can tell her what it took to earn these back." I smiled. Then they've finally found their place. We sat like that until the sun had fully risen and the tide had begun to creep back. Clarice sipped her coffee and leaned her head against my shoulder. It was the first time she'd done that in years. "I never thought I'd get this back," she said softly. "This. Us." "You didn't get it back," I replied. "You built something new, something better." She looked up at me, eyes damp but peaceful. "Mom? Yes? Do you think it's possible to forgive yourself and still feel the weight of what you've done?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "That's how you stay human." Later that morning, as we opened the sliding glass doors to let the sea breeze into the olive room, a woman knocked at the front gate. She looked nervous, shoulders hunched, clutching a worn leather purse. Clarice walked out to meet her, greeted her with warmth and no assumptions. I watched through the window as they spoke, hands moving gently in the air between them. A few minutes later, the woman followed her into the house, into the retreat, into the new space Clarice had carved out of her old mistakes. That was when I knew. The cycle had broken. Clarice wasn't just healing. She was becoming the reason others could, too. As evening approached, we stood again on the balcony, the sea once more casting its long shadow across the deck. She turned to me and said, "We're not starting over." "No," I agreed. "We're starting right. Finally." And I nodded. Because some stories don't end with justice. Some end with understanding, with purpose, with the quiet kind of love that says, "You hurt me, but I stayed long enough to see you come home." And for the first time in a long time, the house felt like home again, not because of its value, but because of the lives it would hold, because of the women it would shelter, because of the second chances it would make possible. We watched the tide roll in together. No more secrets, no more pretending, just mother and daughter beginning again, the right way, the real way.